This episode of Lord Johnlander includes conversation about sexual violence that some listeners may find distressing. Support resources are available from RAINN.org, including a confidential helpline for those in the U.S. That's RAINN.org. Welcome to Lord Johnlander, the Outlander podcast for Lord John fans, where we talk all things Outlander, but especially about Jaime and his Sassenach.
And sometimes we talk about Claire, too.
We can't promise you much, but for the next half hour-ish, we can promise chaos and to make you question whatever life choices led you to listen to us. Before we get into it, this is your one and only warning that show and book spoilers are lurking around every corner.
We're even going to spoil crap that never happened.
Hello, welcome to Lord Johnlander. We are your hosts. I am Mistress Pandora. You can call me Pan. My co-host is here as well.
Hey everyone, it's Beth, Jace We Pray.
And once again, we have Geek in the Pink. Ness is going to join us again. Hello, Ness.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be back again.
Yes. We have so much fun. So... we have... Did we have anything to say in terms of a clarification from last episode?
Yes. We had talked in the last episode whether or not Colum had invited the Duke of Sandringham as a way to sort of like punish Jaime. But I looked in the book, and in the book, it's actually... like they're on their way home from the rent party. Dougal says he ran into like a messenger from Colum, and like the Duke was already on his way. So it doesn't necessarily seem like that's the case unless Colum already knew about the marriage somehow and was still planning to like punish Jaime by inviting the Duke. So probably not, but it's still a possibility. So that's very clear.
I think there's even certain things that we learn in this episode that make it, kind of unclear too, because it almost kind of seems like Dougal could have, even though we clearly see that point where Colum says to Ned last episode, oh, invite him or whatever, but then you find out that Dougal and the Duke have a little arrangement that we'll talk about later. So it's a bit, confusing, I think.
Well, and in the book, Ned wasn't involved in any of that at all because he was with the men, and Colum decided to invite him before they even got back. So
so there you go.
So I'm still kind of looking at that part, around that part of the first book, and I was just glancing down, and Jaime's having a conversation with Hamish. Hamish says, John says, and Jaime's like, John the stable lad, John the cook boy, or John Cameron? And then Hamish says the stable lad. So wouldn't it be funny if John was the stable lad for a little while at the relatives he was staying with decided to send him to the Highlands to punish him.
There you go.
To be a stable lad.
He could have run away. So in Aberdeen, he probably, I got this from our Scottish correspondent, but he probably would have picked up Doric, which is that really, really, really thick dialect. Well, it's not so much dialect, more of its own. It's really its own language. But there's a character in Brave that speaks Doric, and absolutely nobody can understand him. So he could have just. I'm not sure how he would have gotten away with it.
Well, think of his books though, and the things that he manages to make happen. He could have started at a young age the shenanigans, you know.
True.
He does have a knack for them, really.
See, and again, you worried we wouldn't have enough.
Again, I worried, and I thought real long and hard about some stuff, and I have a few things I'm gonna shoehorn in. I stress. It's just what it is.
And I'm like, shh, just let it happen. Just let it happen.
Just it's okay.
Strong start. That's what I say. Strong start. Love it.
Always.
Yes. So this episode is 110. by the pricking of my thumbs. That's a really long title.
Does everybody know what that's from?
No.
No? You don't know what the reference is?
I don't know the reference.
Is it something in Shakespeare?
It is. It's from Macbeth. It's a part of the witch's spell. Actually,
Right,
funny enough, I'm just like remembering this off the
right.
top of my head from school. Yeah, it's from the witch's spell from Macbeth. The three witches in Macbeth with their famous magic spell. I probably should have looked up what it was now that I even said it out loud. Something about by the pricking of my thumb, like is direct, like just a direct link to the fact that there's like witchcraft. It's like something. I almost feel like it's part of something that you'll see even references in other literature these days. That's almost like a way to like Easter egg some witchcraft references and stuff like that, or magic spell references, or so on and so forth. So.
Funny story. We work out of the same, like we use a Google document and take notes. And so we're all in the same thing at the moment. And Beth rewatched this first and put her notes in. And I've only seen this episode one time, and it was like 3 years ago. And her first point on here is Jamie's full English breakfast. I'm like, I do not remember this. And then as soon as I hit play, I went, oh, euphemism.
Yeah. I always remember the beginning of this episode because it's wild. So.
And then my second thought is that he definitely read that book that we talked about in the wedding episode.
She comes first.
That's right.
He took notes.
He did. Good lad.
He's learning. We love to see that. He's working hard, especially after all the drama of last episode.
And he's so determined, like that knock comes on the door and he's just like, nope, not until my lady is done.
Despite the fact that he's going to let somebody into the room and show all her afterglow. Which is just like, I know it's Myrta, but like, it's just awkward as hell. I'd be like, excuse me, sir.
He's also talking close to Myrta with Claire's flavor.
Yeah. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that.
It's like
freaking movie magic. Like his face would be all messed up. He could have the smell. Come on now. And Myrta like looks at her and that's how he knows. Yeah, right. You'd know from him. You'd see him and you'd know.
You smelled it the second you walked in the room, dude. Don't try to pretend you didn't.
I mean, the hair's a bit of a mess, but he'd definitely be more messed up than that. That's actually hilarious. Oh man!
Oh God!
It's like I would love expectations versus reality Outlander of that scene. That would be epic.
I remember an interview with Katrina Balfe, and she said she was talking about how it's very important to get a woman's perspective on things, and she mentioned that like they originally wanted to do that scene a different way, and she saw the script and was like, no. Like this would not happen. So I've always wanted to be like, what were they envisioning?
How did the man write it?
How was it going to go,
That's funny. Should we get back to Jamie trying to get a pardon though?
Yeah. So Duke of Sandringham is coming. We suspect that because of Claire's suspicions that he is not a good person. And then we also know from what Jamie has insinuated that, he's
a predator
after Jamie's hindquarters. Yeah. And then he's so intent. He wants so badly to get a pardon. And especially I think now because of Claire, like he really just wants to, take his place as Laird and be settled and just be a married dude and have kids and stuff. And that he's willing to put himself in risk, in risk's way. And Ned, and whether or not Ned knows Jamie's history with the Duke, he inadvertently pushes Jamie to put his trust in Sandringham, who, has victimized him, not ever actually going through. Yeah. I mean, to the point where Jamie had to make himself sick to avoid being raped. Yeah. So I know Ned didn't mean it, but I was just like, oh, come on, Ned.
It's interesting because I feel like Myrta kind of does something similar and yet he knows, like we know that he knows. And he's you can tell his face, he's like got this grumpy, or I should say extra grumpy face on. He's kind of got a resting grumpy face, but he's got extra grumpy face on about the Duke of Sandringham, and he obviously interrupts their morning sex to talk about it. And he's there, obviously he's like Jamie's side, every moment of all of it. Yeah, it seems like everybody else except for Claire's the only one who is saying Sandringham can help you with this, even though he is like a shady as hell dude.
Well, I mean, no, Myrta was trying to talk him out of it.
Was he? Well, I guess, but then he was like, "Oh, Sandringham is here." Like, then why? Like, I don't know. I think he could have been done more. I guess.
I don't. What? Tie him to something?
I guess so.
That would have made this episode go so differently. But I mean, no, Myrta is like the one person, like the one father figure. I guess you could kind of sort of call Dougal and Colin father figures in a way. But like he's the one person who knows that Sandringham is a predator and wants to prey on Jamie specifically and actually gives two shits about it.
Yeah. Well, enough that he goes and he's gonna like not gonna let him go there alone.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I bring us back to this conversation just a tiny bit, mostly between Jamie and Claire, but also in Myrta as well. So this little bit bugged the shit out of me and I could not put my finger on it. And I fell down we'll call it a research hole, but I went and I rewatched, I must have rewatched like the same 20 seconds of this episode 15 times this evening. He tells Myrta he has boundaries, what he will and will not do to get this pardon.
Right.
And at this point in his life, this pardon is like the most important thing to him because that represents his ability to be himself, be a husband, potentially be a father in what he hopes is the near future, all of this stuff. But he's not willing to trade himself for it.
Yeah.
So guess where that led me? This led me to I've Lost Things. And I watched Jamie offer himself to John in exchange for taking care of William 15-20 times, and it never got less infuriating. One, because there is absolutely, you cannot convince me that Jamie actually thought there was a reality where John would tell him no in that moment. I don't know. That made no sense. I made no point just now.
But I think that Jamie, in more than one way, wanted John to say yes, because when he explains to Claire in A Breath of Snow and Ashes, why he offered, he says, and it's easy to miss if you're not reading carefully, because like the first time I read it, I skipped right over it, but he says like, it wasn't a test in the sense that he was hoping John would say no so that he knew he could trust him. He wanted to sleep with him so that, because he says, and I'm paraphrasing, but you can't be with a man, be with a person, be within them, feel like their hair scratching your body and not know what's in their soul. So like,
he's like, that's the only way. And he says, I don't know if he says this or if if this was an interpretation that I read somewhere that was like, I guess the interpretation was, it was the one way he would know that John was like a safe person to raise William for him.
Because I think, and then he says something like, it's a terrible thing to have those physical things with a person and not feel that, not be able to see within them. And then I think from his experience with Blackjack Randall, he also knows that it's a terrible thing to look in a man's soul and know that he's evil, which he doesn't say, but it's implied.
I'm not going to lie, that whole explanation, like I will take it at face value, but also that really feels very deeply too. He's had a lot of years to work on this, and that's the straightest answer he could come up with.
Oh, well, that's the thing. Why is it all the way in A Breath, Snow and Ashes? Like, once again, I'm calling out unreliable narrator.
Yes.
And
terribly.
Unreliable narrator in the sense of Claire is the narrator. She's hearing this story. And he could be, I'm not, like, don't tell me Jamie doesn't lie to her. Or not even lie. Maybe he lies. We know he's a good liar. But also, he's telling her the truth that he understands. It doesn't mean that that's really what's going on deep inside. Like, we know, smart and dumb person. Like, we know these things, so.
But I mean, to me, I think that passage, I think it's honest. And I just think that Jamie doesn't realize the implications of what that may mean, probably does mean, about his own sexuality. Like, I think he is, like you said, he is telling the truth as he knows it. And in his head, he has logicked out that it's perfectly logical to think this way. And the fact that John is a man makes no difference, because this is just, just one, it's like how he knows. It's like his soul detector is in his penis. So,
Oh,
and he doesn't.
This is the best. And I think too, it's like, he's like, oh, I'm sure all men feel this way. Just like the freaking foreskin. Exactly. I'm sure all men feel this way. That's what he tells himself.
Exactly.
And we're like, okay, sir, you go right ahead and believe what you want to know. But we know things.
Think about like bisexual people you've known in your life, or anybody who's had these own thoughts themselves. You see someone of the same gender and you're like, ooh, they're pretty, but then you're like, oh, but that's normal to like that doesn't make me, that doesn't mean I'm attracted to them. Like sometimes, women just really admire a woman's boobs, like without. So, it's not like people don't still offer those explanations to themselves to try to logic their way out of, what might be an uncomfortable truth for them. People still do it.
Oh, I think I found a way to bring this back to Sandra.
Thank you.
So what we're saying is,
sorry.
Because what we're saying is, Jamie's not just going to give it up for people.
No, just John.
Right, left, and center. Well, yeah, exactly. The reason he does it for John is because he's attracted to him, is because he wants to go there and he's looking for an excuse, and because he's definitely not looking for that when he clearly has the opportunity with people like Sandrium, who are waiting for that.
There we go.
I also think this kind of, we're like, oh, we're back. And I'm like, actually,
no, we're not.
Let's take this turn. I think it actually speaks to the possibility of Jamie being demisexual, because he obviously loves Claire and their connection is so tied to the physical. But I think John, we've talked about before, where John is one of the first men that Jamie can trust. And I don't mean first gay man. I mean like first man who doesn't just try to use him and stuff. So I think by the time he feels that trust with John, then he feels that he could be intimate with him in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because it's so few and far between with him that he might make that connection.
Yeah.
Somebody who we don't trust and nobody should trust, even though they're an actual child, is Leary.
Good job, Ness.
I'm really trying to help you guys out.
This is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love this because it relates to the last episode where I'm like, if you think about this, and once again, I think Pan was the one to point out, like, she's a child in our time, like in modern times, she's very much considered a child. I feel unsure about how she would have been treated at that time, but like to look at it as Leary as a child is such a, it like turns the whole thing upside down in such a crazy way.
Well, and I think because I wrote that comment about her being an actual child in the notes, and to me, it's not even necessarily what the 18th century view is, but Claire is from the 40s, and I think in Leary is 16. So I do think that Claire knows that is still like someone who is underage, and maybe because Claire was so mature because of all her traveling. But I usually don't do this, but I kind of have to stand up a little for Leary, because it was just struck me so much this time watching this, because whether you think Leary is societally a child or not, brains do not develop.
Well, yeah, that's another point. Yeah, for sure.
When Claire goes down to confront her, and let's be clear here, she's mad about a bundle of sticks.
Uh-huh.
Claire,
So dumb.
you can't totally
You can't let it go.
Yeah, exactly. And like later in the episode, she's like disgusted with people believing in, changelings, but she's going to go off on a kid about a bunch of sticks, right? And Mrs. Fitz is like, is there anything I can help with? And she's like, this is between Leary and me. Claire, you are 26 years old. Do you really, or what is she, 27? I don't even know. Like, you probably should be having this conversation with her grandmother and not with her.
Yeah, like, oh, she's buying these things from someone, and I wondered, I had this thought too, like, is it because she was in their bedroom, like, she got, and I don't know about the lock situation in that place, but, like, that's an invasion of her space and her privacy, that makes sense, but once again, you should be talking to her guardian.
But that's not what Claire was talking to Lyra about either. What Claire was talking about was the ill wish and this petty, stupid-ass jealousy shit that I'm just so, God, like, dude, chill, lady.
As a 27-year-old woman, you should not even recognize this 16-year-old girl as your competition. You should just be above that and just ignore her. Seriously, like, just ignore her. It just kind of struck me that this is another example of Claire popping off with her temper and, really kind of, I think, acting inappropriately in this situation. Leary's a dumb kid, and it only spurred Leary on further. And I'm not saying she wouldn't have turned Claire in or whatever, or tried to trick whatever her part in it was, but she may still have done that. But it doesn't help when you slap her and have this whole, like, take your earrings out and take her out in the parking lot situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, you're a fully grown woman, Claire. Like, anyway, so that's my piece on it.
That exchange was just annoying. Like,
it was just so weird to me this time when I watched it.
I have to say, too, thinking about them having this crazy sex and then finding the ill wish and, like, being pissed and, like, ruining, once again, their afterglow and stuff. And then her, like, still being pissed about it and going after this, kid about it. When Jamie clearly, like, even though Jamie's so mad in that moment at the end of episode 9, he's clearly, like, not, and of course he's distracted by the pardon and Sandringham and all that stuff, but, like, they never talk about it. She just goes and does this kind of irrational thing.
Yeah.
Like, when it seems like maybe, I don't know, maybe it seemed appropriate to, like, be upset about it at the end of episode 9, but, like, to bring it back in this episode just seems
It was melodramatic. It was just melodrama.
Yeah,
cheap
exactly.
melodrama.
Yeah, for no reason. And, like, maybe it's so that so that you think that that Leary has, not justification, but, like, that Leary's pissed her in this episode, so that can influence her actions, but it's kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, and I think it's also just trying to, like, lay the groundwork for us to see Leary as a villain because we are meant to side with Claire. So we're not really meant to think about it any more deeply than that. But I did. It's once again like Rent. It's like maybe Claire's being making not so great decisions. And what I love too is I'm pretty sure if it's not a direct same quote, then it's something very similar. But I'm thinking going forward to season 3, where she's barking at Claire. She comes back and she's barking at Claire again. And I swear she says some of the same stuff that they say in that fight, which is, she's like, oh, he's mine. Like, it was just so funny to think of her with a shotgun, like watching like her in the kitchen at Castle Leoc. Like the parallel there is just so hilarious in my head. That is one of my favorite scenes because of the way like Claire just like body checks her.
Oh my god, it's so intense. It's so funny to think of like how long this went on.
And I'm not defending any other of Leary's actions. Like she does go off the deep end, but like, in this instant, I don't think Claire was right.
I'm still reeling from we're meant to side with Claire. That just goes against my nature.
It's interesting though. It's like once you start thinking about unreliable narrator and her, like, don't think about her voiceover, try to be critical of her actions, it brings out a lot of good podcast topics though.
But it does lead us to Gayless. Can we skip Arthur, please? Because he's not okay. We're just gonna leave him to
I
his.
hate even looking at him.
Just gonna leave him to that chamber pot. Poor guy.
He'll be gone soon.
Very. So Claire finds Galus dancing pretty close to naked under the full moon in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, she shows all but the front bits. Throughout the whole scene, she will be just about as naked as most women get on television. Yeah. Very proudly, very talking about her nipples.
The wind dusting across her nipples or something.
Yeah, like acorns. She says they turned into acorns. I'm like, oh, that's a great. It's a great image because I think about I'm like, yeah, acorns, man, they do look like little nipples.
Then she says to Claire, "You could have joined me, but you British are such a prudish people." And I'm like, is she just talking about the dance or what is happening?
Probably not.
Hell no.
Was it no, it's the 60s, right? She's from the 60s.
Flower child.
Yeah, she's like, they're doing all kinds of stuff. Free love. She loves it. I love watching the season and episodes of Galus, thinking about her being from then. It like casts such a different light on the whole thing. I don't know if I've specifically looked at it that way before, but it's a lot of fun doing it.
It is. That is kind of a neat. I guess it kind of sort of enhances the rewatch experience because this is my first rewatch, and knowing everything I know about Galus, it's just red flag city.
Can I talk about one of my pet peeves?
Sure.
And I am going to piss a lot of people off with this. And let me say first that this is something that I have done myself in the past. And then I just realized it was, in my opinion, yucky, and I stopped. But I really, really don't like when Galus is used in like modern AUs as just like the quirky best friend.
Oh no, yes, hate it.
And it happens so much.
It's always Galus, and I'm just like, and I think the biggest thing for me is that she literally raped Ian.
She is a rapist.
Nobody would ever put Stephen Bonnet or BJR in a fic as like a quirky best bud. And I just think the standards are so, I mean, they're just different. And I think it just shows, and I'm not saying people who do this or think this way are bad people. I just think that they maybe haven't thought about it as much. I just think that it shows that women or people in general, a lot of times still do not take females raping men like seriously.
Absolutely.
Although it's interesting though, because with Geneva, don't ever say it was anything but raped. And I agree with that, but people will go apeshit about Geneva and then not really say much about Galus. Like there's never any outrage about Galus,
Because Galus did not put anything between Jamie and Claire. That's why the fandom goes over the top on Geneva. I'm not going to say all of the things I have to say about that because we have a whole episode for that. But I will say two things to your point, Beth, which is 1,000% I agree with you. I get the ickies with Galus as the quirky best friend. I don't mind including her in fic. Like, she's a great, Dougal needs somebody to talk to. Yeah. Like that, she fits that. She fits the not necessarily bad, but kind of get weird, creepy vibes from her kind of character. Like, cool. But at the same time, so that's point one. Point two, there's not a lot of flushed out female characters in this universe.
No.
That would fit that bill.
Yeah, it's so true.
So if you're writing a fan fiction and you're just like, I just need a chick that Claire can be friends with, the list is small.
It is. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. The only one I've seen, I remember, because when I first started off in the fandom, I was reading the most popular Jamie Claire fic and seeing tons of Galus as a quirky best friend and enjoying it, honestly, and not thinking about it until way later on when I was thinking more critically about so much stuff. So I understand how people fall into that trap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I've done it too.
Exactly. Yeah, and she, for as evil and psychotic as she is, she's a super fun character, and she is she has something. Like she's not two-dimensional.
Yeah.
She's there's stuff going on, right? She has this huge arc in season 1 specifically, and it continues and all this stuff. And yeah, she's interesting. Like, you got to give it to her that she's interesting. And it's funny because the only other person who would play Claire's best friend that I can't even remember from that fic back in the day is Joe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, Joe fits the bill way better. But I'm like, who else? I'm even trying to think right now who else, and I'm like struggling to find
use
options.
Louise, because she
Louise
was
is good,
really
yeah.
a good friend to Claire in season 2. So yeah, but she's also kind of quirky and fun, but not a rapist.
Key point.
Yeah, Louise would definitely be better, yeah.
So, I mean, also, though, I don't want to, like, shame people who are just, like, trying to write fic and have fun with it. Like,
No.
I mean, do what you gotta do.
Yeah, of course not.
This is less of a, this is really gross, don't ever put this in your fic kind of a thing, I think, and more of a, let's also include the female rapist when we're thinking critically about the text. Like, don't sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because it wasn't Jamie that she personally victimized, just because it wasn't Claire that she personally victimized.
And just be aware, like, if you use these characters, the whole thing about fic is you're using these characters because people have previous knowledge from them from canon. Like, you have to keep that in your awareness when you're writing stuff. So if she is going to be Claire's best friend, then maybe you want to subvert that somehow. Like, seeing as like people's knowledge of her in the
just a little world building
in canon, like
Yeah.
you could, some world building, and just you have to. I think you have to keep previous knowledge. You can't just pretend it's not, unless you're going to make notes,
Right?
Beginning notes saying, "Oh, by the way, Galus is pure
Right,
heart."
exactly.
I don't know, which seems kind of silly to me, but whatever. You do you. I won't judge you for that. At least you made note of it.
And again, this is like, it really is a pet peeve for me. And I think that I just would urge people to think a little more about it and think, a little more critically of the text. And no, nobody that uses Galus is a bad person or, doing anything bad. It's just a pet peeve for me. And I still read the fics.
right.
Well, there's so many. It's like most of them,
just
really.
That little part of it kind of grates on me, right? So, but I think it just is the bigger point about, like, just the general dismissiveness people have over men being raped and stuff, and especially by women and that. So
it'd be interesting to see when episodes for season 3 come out. We could even compare how Galus is portrayed as a villain versus how other male characters are portrayed as a villain, because I even from general memory, I know it's
totally.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be interesting to take apart.
Absolutely.
She doesn't come off as vicious, I'll tell you that, unless you really, like, once again, unless you really think critically.
Well, and it's interesting, though, because her actions are very vicious. Like, she slowly poisoned Arthur Duncan. She burned her one husband alive, like,
yep.
So
Black Widow.
It doesn't stop
but
there.
Like, you're right that they kind of like managed to make it not seem as evil somehow.
And yet she was the serial rapist. She was the one who was collecting young men for this express purpose.
Literally. Yeah.
And I wonder too, is it because what you guys will talk about next episode for the Devil's Mark, like, and it's such a good part of the show, and it's such a good, interesting part of this part of the series when she sacrifices herself, or quote unquote, because she doesn't die, sacrifices herself for Claire, and she's carried through the streets, and like, is it that supposed to be some? Does that stick in people's minds as like some sort of redemption moment, and like that's why you forget that she's like done all these terrible things, like before and after? Like, I wonder about that, because that I think is something that I remember so clearly about Galus, is what she does in the next episode and how, I guess, different it is than the rest of the series. But she's an interesting one.
Definitely.
Fairy Hill Changeling, is that where we're going next?
Yes. Oh, actually, I'm just looking at our notes here.
Oh, because they go on their little walk, and they're talking about, and they find out information about, this is what was kind of struck me rewatching this episode, and something I don't think I really noticed the previous times, was all the signs that Galus is a raging psychopath are throughout this entire episode. And I only noticed this time. Her face in general, just watch her face. Don't even watch Claire when she's talking, watch Galus when Claire's talking. She's like dead in the eyes and like she's got this creepy smile and like clearly untrustworthy. And here's Claire like, oh, we're friends, I'm not gonna do this to you. And then Galus has got this crazy look on her face the entire time, which I just found wild, especially during this little like walk and talk. And they're talking about Dougal's wife, and she's so callous about it.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, oh, yeah, his poor wife, and she was beautiful once, but not anymore, and she's, like, stuck in her tower, and, like, she has all these really negative things to say about her, and, oh, because we found out that Dougal and Galus are lovers by this point, and that she's pregnant with this child, she will go on in this episode to talk about her husband and Dougal's wife. Like, they're disposable. Like, they're disposable people. And you'll find out that her first husband, or not her first, whatever, the first husband that we know she killed is disposable. She does not, like, she has very little respect for human life. And it's like, and it's so kind of, like, casual that unless you really listen to what she's saying and watch her crazy facial expressions, I feel like it's not really, doesn't really hit home quite as intensely. And of course, without, a rewatch kind of perspective.
And not only does she have little respect for human life, but a lot of it is she has little respect for men, like men, the lives of men. Because she tried to like maybe possibly cast a spell or what have you that would kill Dougal's wife. But like she literally, I mean, again, she killed several of her husbands. It's implied she killed her husband in Jamaica too. And then she literally is like collecting young boys to just use, so I think a lot of it has to do with men in general. Like she just...
And I think, and then probably the women in her way, which just happens to be Dougal's wife, who is somebody who's in her way, and so she casts this spell to, she says, to set her and Dougal free, and we'll see the possible ramifications of that. And I think what I thought was interesting too, watching it, was that you find out that she has a bracelet, a very pretty bracelet that she wants Claire to admire, that she says is from Dougal, that was supposed to be for his wife, that was given to him by the Duke of Sandringham. And so you start to get the tidbits to kind of discover that Dougal is handing off the Jacobite money to the Duke.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Dougal in a way is likely working for the Duke of Sandringham to forward the Jacobite cause. And that's not to say Dougal doesn't believe in it himself, but I do think he is beholden to the Duke in certain ways because of it.
And I think it makes sense, because if the Duke has connections with people like Blackjack Randall and stuff like that, like obviously, and he kind of is somebody who you kind of get wind of in the series, that he just seems to have these connections to all these different people. And obviously Jamie thinks that he could play a big part in getting a pardon and all that stuff. So it kind of makes sense that Dougal needs somebody to kind of have a direct link to the Bonnie Prince Charlie and his Jacobite cause and all that. So
they're on the Fairy Hill and they're talking about the gift, and then they hear the baby cry, and Galus tells her the whole changeling thing, and Claire decides that she's going to go find the baby, and Galus just leaves. And so then we have Claire like just left on the Fairy Hill with this baby who dies, right before Claire gets to it. I was struck by just thinking about Claire's maternal instincts in, the way she just holds the baby and is so upset. And then later when Jamie comes to find her, he takes the baby from her, kind of gave me like, there were like parallels to when Claire is holding Faith and Louise has to come in and take the baby from her. That was really sad.
Oh, it's the worst. And I hate that you have to hear the baby cry, and then it coughs at the end, which is like, something about that was like so hard to hear. But I thought what was interesting too is she also says, like, he takes the baby from her, but then she also says, "Take me home," which is also what she says at the end of the episode of Faith. "Take me home to Scotland," or whatever. I was like, because when I read your note, I was like, oh yeah, that's what she says at the end of that episode. I'm like, oof, I don't like that. I don't like it. I don't like it too much.
Yeah. So I feel like they must have been definitely purposely drawing those parallels.
You'd think, yeah.
While they're on the Fairy Hill, they have a conversation about what Jamie believes and what the locals believe, and his pragmatic faith kind of comes out again. So like he doesn't necessarily believe in the changelings and fairies and stuff like that. He's still that I'm not going to, what was it, shame the devil in his own church.
In his own church, yeah.
Yeah. He's still got that going on, but also like he understands the value of finding comfort in your beliefs, even if they don't make sense. So I thought that was an interesting bit of Jamie's character reveal there. That was good characterization.
Which harkens back to, is it The Way Out? I think he talks about that.
Yeah. At the Black Kirk, yeah.
But what I liked too, because like coming into this part of the episode where you kind of see this happen and you're very emotional, and a lot of us will side with Claire and think, why are these people doing this to this baby? It's so heartless and callous. How could you do that? I kind of just love Jamie's explanation of it, because it just makes you okay. I think it makes Claire okay to leave, and it makes the audience okay to like end the scene and leave sad dead child, because at least he made sense of the situation, which I'm grateful for as a viewer, because it's obviously a hard thing to kind of
we get closure.
Yeah, and he talks about the same thing later when Claire considers telling Jenny that she's a time traveler. Both times he makes the comment that like these people have not seen anything outside of the village that they live in, or in Jenny's case, Lallybroch or Brockmorda, and all they know is what the priest tells them on Sunday. You can in today's day and age, I feel like there is no excuse for ignorance, because every piece of information in the world is at your fingertips. In this case, in the 18th century, truly, like, you really hard pressed to blame people for their ignorance in some of this stuff, because they truly just had no access to any information. I mean, most of them probably could not even read and write. So
do the best you can with what you have.
I'd argue too that I think it's relevant. Yeah, I'd argue too that it's relevant even to today, just in the mindset of, you don't know how people grew up, you don't know what people around them believed, you don't know what they did have access to, even though people do have obviously so much more access to things that they never had before. But I think it's a good thing to come at as maybe for expectations of other people and stuff like that.
I do think that, especially for like kids and stuff, but my opinion is just that once you're an adult and free to live your life as you choose, if you don't choose to seek knowledge, then it's just not an excuse. Like, but that, again, that's just my opinion on it. Yeah. Like,
no, I think it's valid.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're back to the Duke of Sandringham now.
Do you feel like we have been stalling? Like, we knew he's coming. I feel like we have spent the last 30 minutes trying really hard not to get to the Duke of Sandringham. Can we just get it out of our system right now? He is horrible.
He's horrible.
He's horrible. But it's not, let me just be clear that it's not because he is not perfectly portrayed by Simon Callow, who is an incredible Scottish actor, which is very exciting.
But I have to say that I feel like this is another case where they made him so over the top ridiculous and like even funny that it sort of diverts your attention from the fact that he is a predator.
And I think the only argument against that is that that's not his purpose in the story, like as the narrative as it is now. Yeah. But I understand what you're saying.
It's not part of the narrative plot moving forward, but it's so important in understanding Jamie.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder why he's BFFs with Blackjack Randall.
Ugh, yeah. And then, of course, I think, too, it's fun to watch. He's such a fun actor. I think people will recognize the actor in the show and stuff, so that's kind of like, it brings an interesting kind of element into it. And I think it's good, at least for this episode, that you kind of get reminded over and over again that he's friends with Blackjack Randall, despite his trying to deny that fact very obviously that he's lying. And so at least you get that reminder here, and so you kind of hopefully can kind of see through his kind of like antics or whatever. But then then you kind of see how easily Claire motivates him to kind of steer in her direction for the thing that she wants him to do and things like that.
Does she? For like 5 seconds, but like as we will see in season 2, really she just painted a target on her back. This whole episode I'm watching, I'm like, Claire, shut your freaking mouth. You're making everything so much worse. Just stop. She drove me insane. She's like real big for her britches in this episode. And I guess maybe I was just in a, Claire sucks kind of a mood. I don't know why. Doesn't sound like me at all.
In the case of this episode, I mean, except for the Leary thing, like, I don't really see Claire as any more complicit in inviting being totally duped by the Duke of Sandringham than Jamie. Like, especially Jamie, because he literally knows what this man is like. Claire kind of knows secondhand, and both of them kind of invite, like, I'm like, the whole time I'm like, especially when like Claire's like reading out loud, or Jamie's reading out loud part of the letter, like the petition or whatever. And I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, this guy is never in a million years going to help you. I just want to shake them both, because I'm like, this is just so stupid.
And the only thing I noticed was that Jamie has that singular focus that Claire has in Rent. Like, that's what he has with the pardon in this episode. He's like, he gets that knowledge from Myrta that Sandringham is here, and it's like he's a dog with a bone, and that's the only thing. And like, he kind of refuses any idea that it couldn't go his way, probably because he thinks he can influence him. I can only imagine that would be his thought, and that he can protect himself and he doesn't have to worry about the effects of whatever that influence might bring on him or whatever. But I think he's refusing to because he wants it so badly, because he knows him and Claire need to get out of Castlejak. He kind of just refuses, and he doesn't have any other options at the moment. I think he's just kind of like driving really hard into this dead end.
Maybe where I'm coming at this, that's not none of those words made sense in that order. Maybe where I'm coming from here, there we go, is like season 5, season 6, Jamie wouldn't be this dumb.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Claire might, because she's a little bit more impulsive, but Jamie would not approach someone like the Duke of Sandringham for something like this unless he had 3 or 4 backup plans already in place. So he's more mature, he's more calculating in the later seasons. Oh, obviously he's got extensive experience in dealing with horrible people.
Well, and he hasn't experienced the great trauma of the end of season 1 yet, too. I think there's a big difference between post season 1 finale Jamie and pre season 1 finale Jamie, as far as that kind of stuff goes.
That young guy, that youthful feeling of immortality.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Speaking of mortality, Maura has died. See what I did?
Yes.
And Dougal's not okay. Dougal is not okay.
This is that scene that I mentioned.
I forgot all about this scene.
Of him losing his absolute mind over this. And I could wax poetic about this for hours and hours on end, because I just don't quite understand why it happens this way. And I'm like, is it in character? Is it not in character? I think it's in character, but I still can't quite wrap my mind around why it's so public. And I think it's because we don't know what his relationship with his wife was. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe DG has something to say about that, but I don't know anything about that. But I would rather let myself contemplate until I come up with something that I like. But and I love that Colm is standing there, watching him, judging him, saying terrible things, but like clearly is so worried about him. I love that, because he's like very like a hawk, like watching his every move until they kind of get him away to a safe place. I think it says a lot about Colm and Dougal and their relationship, and it's kind of like, what I found really interesting too is it really felt like the entire castle, and even Claire, who has a very complicated relationship with Dougal, is rallying. Like, once he's like experiencing this intense kind of thing and this horrible loss, obviously, and even she's rallying to do her part to help the guy out.
And I think, you asked like why the public display. I think it's because he's a narcissist. He's a narcissist, and B, he is like, I'm a man, I can only have big angry feelings, right? Like, I mean, men are,
Right.
there's a lot of men that are still like that to this day, right? It's like my only feelings that I can have are like anger, and then like, and it's like anger at himself, and he's like hitting himself in the head and lashing out at everybody.
Yeah,
He's
that's
just
wild.
a giant man baby, and he has no idea.
Yes.
The only note I made on this was that the Mackenzie men need therapy. Like,
so much therapy.
When you see him smack himself in the head, especially,
it's just he's like it's like watching a toddler, have a temper tantrum.
It does make sense. Yeah, so it does make sense when you say he's acting out his anger against himself.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. It's like, so he's treating himself the way he would if he was pissed off at somebody else. Like, I'm like, suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. He's punishing himself.
I'm sure he feels very guilty about how he's treated his wife. And I mean, never enough when she was alive to like actually spend time with her. But,
exactly.
But he's mad at himself. And so, there's that, there's the narcissism. And I think there's even a slight element of like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
But that's always where I go, is that what it is? Is there, he has to show some big display to appease someone, whether it's Colum, whether it's the court as a whole, like the whole clan as a whole.
Yeah.
If he doesn't act this way, are there going to be some sort of consequences for him that he's not ready to deal with? Yeah, like that's I think there's got to be something of that in there, especially because of his newish lover and the child that he and the whole kind of crazy thing that's going to happen in the back half of.
But shout out to Angus for being the guy that'll do anything, and he just goes right in there with the drink to get him to drink it. I mean, you need a guy, you need a honey badger around, because they are the ones that will do anything. And he shows this later on in the season too, when Claire's like seeking help to get Jamie out of Wentworth prison and stuff. So it's like your friend, he's like a little bit crazy, but like you definitely keep him around because like you need that little bit of crazy in your life,
Angus is a little guy, but he has the largest testicles in all of Scotland.
Oh, absolutely. He really does. He's got, and maybe because he has something to prove, but he just like will swing it like whatever the wind blows, like, and he will take every opportunity to be
big
like, I can do
balls
this.
Of steel. That's Angus. So I actually think that Dougal's reaction, as over the top as it was, I think that was more genuine than not. And here's why I think that. Because at the next dinner party from hell, when Arthur keels over, he's completely like very happy about this.
Yeah.
Yes. Not even a second of dread or shock. It doesn't even try to hide it. Not even for a half a second.
And I think if he had been acting out over Maura's death because it's what he thinks he's supposed to do, or he's trying to avoid suspicion about his involvement with Galus or whatever it may be. I think if that were the case, if that part were more of an act, I think he would have been neutral at the party.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, yeah, okay. And then Galus' reaction, on the other hand, to Dougal's kind of blatant amusement, maybe even, is dramatic as hell. And she's got crazy. It's funny too when I talk about like her facial expressions give away everything in this episode. She's got real crazy eyes, even when her face is, or even when her mouth is in that perfect O of like shock. Yeah. The anticipation in her face is just very obvious.
And she like does nothing, and then just goes into this like scream that is just like
wail. Yeah,
I mean, she's a worse actress than Claire. Like. she's just not not doing it.
And I just am like, so Claire will tell the audience that she smells was it cyanide on his breath or something like that, and so that he's been poisoned. But who said that he was slowly poisoned?
I think they talk time? I think in the book Claire opines that was the reason for like all his like flatulence and stuff, was because she was
Okay,
like
that makes
slowly
sense.
poisoning him over time with the cyanide. But then I do think like once Dougal's wife died, she was like, all right, let's
Break out the rat poison.
yeah.
Which she will regret when she finds out that Colum has caught on to this. He looks at, I think you catch him looking at Dougal, I know specifically, with like horror on his face that he's happy that Arthur Duncan has keeled over.
Yeah.
And said there will be, because of Gillis's impatience, unless Colum kind of had his ear to the ground and kind of knew about Gillis and Dougal beforehand, which we know, but we know that he
you
knows
can
now.
see the gears grinding in Colum's head as he's looking at Dougal's like smug grin, and then he's looking at Galis's reaction, and he's just like, oh, like yeah, exactly.
Hell nah. Too much stuff is going on under my nose, and I don't like it. And yeah.
Well, and then he really gives it to Dougal and gives him a reality check when he takes him back to the, Laird's room or whatever, when he says to him, that's Arthur Duncan's child, just as Hamish is my child, like
in front of Jamie again.
I know. He needs a witness.
Please.
A gut punch. Like, talk about the worst thing that's the worst thing you can say to Dougal. Like, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, that's the worst thing you can say to him. Like, and then you see him after that whole, while he just, like, reams him out and just, like, cuts into him in, like, the deepest way you could. And he's dead inside after. Like, his face is totally dropped. He can't even look up. He's looking at the ground, and Jamie has to, like, shuffle him out of the room. Like, he's just, like, he's done now. He's done.
I feel like we should go back to the stupid ass duel, but let's go ahead and we're here. Let's
oh yeah, we skipped the duel.
Let's go. We might as well get this out. It strikes me that Colum keeps dressing down Dougal in front of Jamie. I feel like this is probably contributing to the animosity between Dougal and Jamie, because in doing so, Colum is elevating Jamie's position and lowering Dougal's.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Ugh.
So that was
absolutely.
I wonder too, is he doing that to punish Jamie? Because if you want to, I feel like kind of like unleashing a stray dog on your enemy or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, he knows that's Dougal's. That's how to get Dougal fired up about. He's already made Jamie pay for Colum wanting him as the next clan leader. So it's like, it just seems to be a string that he pulls on his puppets, right?
But it's also, he's showing Jamie, he's elevating Jamie, but at the same time, he's showing Jamie, this is what happens when you don't toe the line.
Oh, absolutely.
And look at me, how I'm gonna treat my brother and the consequences that he has to go through. And he's like he's essentially the closest person to me. And I wouldn't think twice about doing this or worse to you.
A power play.
And that's the motivation. Well, that's his MO in general, but that's why he's so pissed at the last scene of them in the episode. It's because he goes, stuff keeps happening that I am not privy to, and I think it really triggers his insecurities of, like, the one thing he has is that he's in charge. So when all this shit starts happening, especially with these people that he knows have a high status in his clan, and even Jamie, even though he's technically not even a part of Clan Mackenzie, he's still, like, because he's elevated him himself, he sees them now thinking that they can kind of run amok and do what they want, and Colum will now show everybody that no, that's not the case. That's never the case. People only do the shit that he wants them to do. He's going to show it in a very kind of dramatic way.
Like dogs fighting.
But I do love that Colum calls Jamie this one. He banishes Dougal to his castle, and says to grieve for your wife and plan the funeral and all that. And he goes, Rupert and Angus and this one will go with you. And he points at Jamie's way. And then Jamie tries to, like, fight him on it because he doesn't want to go. And he gives him shit and he cuts him off every time, which I just think is kind of funny.
It's like John calling Claire that woman.
That woman.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So let's go back just a little bit to the stupidest duel ever.
Oh my god.
Ever.
Seriously.
It's
it
near
was
pointless.
So were those guns even loaded? And do you mean to tell me that the McDonald's horses aren't gun broke? Really?
Oh, I know, right?
Really?
Like, oh my god. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Well, the whole thing is ridiculous, and like, it's like just whip your penises out and compare them and get it over with.
Yes,
like,
that's exactly what it is.
Not even like it's stupid. It's just stupid. And Sandringham is like playing it up like this is gonna be some like fight for his life.
And he's so like,
It's
I'm
not
so
he's
scared.
excited about it though. He's like
he's nervous
about
and
it.
scared. Yeah, it's the drama. It's the dramatique, right? But
yeah.
it's not even 2 first blood. It's a single shot duel. This is no big deal.
And yet he told Claire at the party, "Oh, I'm the one who's going to be shedding my blood." Like, so dramatic.
But he
like,
says
calm
to Jamie,
down.
like, I'm assured that nobody will actually get hurt. Like, it's just such a farce.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just like,
and then it's done and nothing happens, and you're like, okay, what was the point of this? And then they're shooting the shit back and forth, and it's the dumbest. It's just the dumbest. Like, what do they even like? Just think of a bunch of
exactly.
Just, like,
I'm like,
calling each other dickheads over and over again.
Don't you guys
and that's
have
all it
cattle
is.
to steal or something? Like,
yeah, yeah. Should have things to do.
How many times in this series, and I don't mean just because it's early. It's only episode 10. How many times does Jamie get called a sodomite? I don't actually like that word, but that's the word that they use. Because this is,
I mean, a lot.
Like a lot, enough that it starts to.
You wonder why
it's
all the time. Yeah.
Like, what vibe is he giving?
Yeah.
Like 18th century gaydar. Like,
I love it.
Oh God, what he must have like a bi pride flag tattooed on his face somewhere. I can't see it.
But the thing is that Jamie got involved in this again. All for the sake of trying to get the Duke of Sandringham to deliver this petition. And all it got him was an injury, and it gave Colm the perfect excuse to get Jamie out of his face. Which, and I saw somebody made a note about this too, like, now the men are gone. He had a perfect excuse to get rid of Jamie too. And it's now they can, Claire and
it played right into Colm's hand.
And now and then right after they're gone, Claire and Galus are arrested. And I think the book goes more into detail about Claire thinking that, like kind of realizing that, this was Colm's plan all along.
And I wonder too if it's something he's been coming up with, like maybe if he discovered Gales and Dougal's relationship a little bit earlier, and he was kind of planning something because he knew the rumors about her, and nothing ever was really done about it. And then obviously he's not happy that Claire and Jamie got married, and he sees a similarity there. And or if it's something where, like I was talking about, he kind of sees these people around him who have power around him, kind of doing what they want to do, and kind of not asking their laird's permission, which is how he holds control over his clan. And so he's like, okay, you're gonna pretend like you don't need my say to do this, that, and the other thing, then I'm gonna show you what the kind of power.
Well, and I think too, it's just practical. He doesn't want Jamie to be married to a Sassenach, so send Jamie away, get her, burned as a witch, and then it puts Jamie right back again in that position where could possibly become the laird.
So I think this brings us to the last scene, which is their kiss goodbye, and this would constitute a Jamie Fraser erection scale pause.
Yes. So I actually struggled to decide, because there's just not, I'm just not getting big boner vibes from this whole episode, right? So,
No.
even, I think he's just been injured. He's pretty sad. Like, I'm going to go with like a 2. Like, I think he's just, it's not a very lustful moment.
And so I think the same thing, but I was just thinking what does make this more interesting, or I think what it kind of like alludes to that his time away from his wife, when I think it'll be off, maybe it'll be eventually off the charts because he's far away and not getting his regular romp that he's used to now for quite a while. But yeah, it's probably because Dougal has to interrupt it. I'm gonna give it a 2.5.
Pan?
I'm kind of torn, so I think I'm gonna go with a 1.5. But I'm torn between a 1.5 and a 2, and here's why. And it has nothing to do with Jamie or Claire. It's Dougal saying it's Dougal. No, his interjection. I said, "Kiss her," did a swallow her. That cracks me up.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's
because
funny,
it's like you said the thing that I was thinking. Thank you, man.
And he's just had it with those two.
He's
like
done. He's so fucking over it.
Well, he's
seen enough hanky panky up between them for a lifetime. Yeah. He's just done.
Well, now he's got to go bury his dead wife, and he has to get away from his regular hanky panky.
His nephew is babysitting him. He's done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's not having it.
So I think I'm going to actually bump it up to a 2, just because of the Dougal factor.
There you go. Funny fun.
All right.
Comedy factor. And then what I will say, a great thing that we cannot forget about the end of this episode is Jamie tells Claire, please stay away from Galus Duncan. Colum is going to be after her now because he's really pissed about about Dougal and Galus' relationship. And what does Claire do? What does Claire do the minute he leaves?
Well, it annoys me that she does that too, because we've seen evidence already that Galus would not do the same for her. Like, she's learned enough about Galus's character that if Claire needed Galus would be like, I'm not getting myself into the middle of that any shit with them,
And that Galus' priorities are not for, she's not worried about the baby. She's not worried about Maura Mackenzie. She's not worried about Arthur Duncan. But here Claire is trying to warn her.
And why doesn't Claire tell her that Dougal is gone?
Yeah, that's always fun.
Galus is like, oh, my man will never let anything happen to me.
Like, Dougal...
And she doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's quite strange. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready for the fic rec?
Yeah. So I can take this one this week. It was kind of a last minute change. The fic rec this week is It's Not a Duel by Happy Days. This kind of sort of fits. And the reason I say kind of sort of is because it involves a duel. It's actually more of a season 4, season 5 canon divergence thing. It's a cute story. It's vaguely Jamie John if you squint. Happy Days wrote it, so of course it is. But it's kind of got this fun, really ridiculous Eye of the Tiger training montage sort of vibe to it.
Yeah.
So lots of fun, lots of love to that author. He's amazing. So we will link that in our socials.
He's amazing. Kudos to anybody who can write a duel that's readable and exciting, and his action scene.
Action is so hard. So. Yeah.
Kudos.
Well, we managed to do this in a single episode.
We did. Hey, the goal. Always.
It's only slightly
ourselves. In a mere half hour.
Slightly over a half hour, about more like 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Ness, thank you so much for joining us again. This was super fun. Always love your insight and your Dougal standing. It never gets old.
I'm glad. I will be here for as long as you need it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye. This podcast is not affiliated with Outlander, Sony, Stars, and definitely 100% not with Diana Gabaldon. All opinions expressed are our own, and we may not even believe them ourselves. In fact, nothing in this podcast should be taken seriously as a general rule. We may not even be real people. Does this podcast even exist?
This podcast is not suitable for children, immature adults, homophobes, anyone who takes fandom too seriously, people who don't understand that the characters aren't real, people with sticks up their ass, people who hate fun, and people who have no sense of humor. Do not try any of these hot takes at home. We are professionals.
The FDA has not approved this podcast for human consumption. Side effects may include nausea, vomiting, the urge to send us anonymous homophobic hate, ringing in your ears, and constipation. If you experience any of these side effects, ask your doctor if dying mad about it is right for you.
If you know us in real life, no, you don't.